Okay, so now we're going to really talk about Black History Month and the meaning behind it and why we do it. So for Black History Month, it's a month to celebrate all the achievements which we have within our communities from the different sectors that we have in the UK, and it's also to just also showcase the history and also all the contributions that we have made to the British history as a whole. Um, and I think it's like very important to celebrate that because it's very educational, and we can also see how far we have come as a community, and looking into the future and working on making a better future for our community and the younger generation. So I think it's quite a very good month to have. And I think that mostly brings awareness as well, and there's some form of activism into it, because even though it's Black History Month and we're celebrating all these achievements, but we still have to look at coming out of having it 1 month and celebrating it 365 days a year, then having that 1 month. But yeah, so that's how I feel about the month, and that's what I think, it kind of highlights the achievements that we have in our community and allows us to celebrate that and also look into the future. So, Margaret, the first question I'd like to ask you is, what is the importance of Black History Month from the perspective of the university?
Okay, I have a sort of ambivalence about Black History Month because, like you, I think that it is bizarre that we celebrate in one month of the year when we're all Black for 365 days a year, but never mind. It is great that we do have a month in which we can focus on a specific part of the population that is otherwise marginalized. But one of the things that really hit me was on the 25th of May, 2020, when for 8 minutes and 47 seconds, a man's life was lost because another man thought fit to kneel on his neck, almost as if he thought with impunity, you know what, the system's going to be on my side because this person here underneath my knee is worth little.
Yeah.
I think there was a point when the world said, that's enough. And it was, it was really fascinating to me that even though we've had Black History Month for year after year after year, and it started in America, we had the murder of George Floyd, which tells me that the message isn't actually moving quickly enough. And it was really salutary when organizations and individuals around the world said, actually, actively, we've got to do more now. So I'm sort of ambivalent towards it. I do think it's great, but on the other hand, I think it's too little, it's not enough, and it's not impacting systemic racism in the way that we should be. And from the perspective of universities, we have the ability to get people to understand that colonialism was built on writings that strove to diminish a certain group of people, to eradicate or annihilate their history, and to make sure that their institutions were seen as less important than the incoming institutions. And what that did was to minimize the self-worth of a whole people and their power to dictate their own future. And I think educational establishments have the ability to change those writings, to get people to understand the limited perspective of those writings, to get people to understand that others have a stake in their own history, and that the institutions that they had could be just as important as the institutions that they were made to absorb. And what's really important about recognizing empire and colonialism and its strength is that we have to understand that my parents and people of their generation were taught with books that were written from the perspective of, so my parents' generation reading these books that are all about the importance of someone else's country and someone else's culture, and And I think it's really important that we, as a university and other universities and other education emporia, actually strive to say, no, we're all important here. Yeah. Look at the writings and let's see how else we should interpret this.
Okay. Thank you, Margaret. Annette, what is your intake when it comes to Black History Month and the perspective of the university?
Okay. Well, you know, the university's been in Coventry for a while. It was a polytechnic before, and I have to say that I believe Black History Month in the UK, Margaret's correct that, you know, it did start in America, but in the UK it's been since the late 1980s. Yeah. And I actually celebrated it myself. I used to be part of a Black women's organisation in Coventry that no longer exists. It's called Asaba Women's Centre. And that was the first time that I celebrated Black history, and it was a great education for me, certainly, that I passed on to others, including my own children. And I think Coventry University, being a university in a city such as Coventry, which is very diverse ethnically as well as in all other ways, but in terms of people, I mean, you're talking about, you've got first, second, third generation migrants or children or grandchildren of migrants, you've got international students and staff. We've got refugees here that all have a Black history. I mean, it's funny when we talk about Black history, I think about Black histories, because yes, whilst we might have all originated from Africa, many of us now have come from the diaspora. So whether that's America, whether that's the Caribbean, you know, whether that's Europe, Britain, etc. So I think the university, especially when you think about the international role that the university has in terms of all those places I've talked about and the students and the staff that make up that university, I think the Black history, the university has always, you know, had a role in it, but I think there's more to be done, and there's more that can be done to recognise the, not just the histories, but you know, as Margaret said, you know, the sacrifices that our ancestors, you know, our parents, our grandparents, and our ancestors have made to actually enable the West to have all these universities and have all of these knowledges and all these libraries and things like that. And it's really important, I think, as well, that we share the history of Black people or people of African descent with everybody, not just Black people. Everybody needs to know, actually, we have a history before slavery. We have a history that goes right back to the very beginning of time in itself. We were doing science, we were doing research, we were doing education, we had universities, we had all of these things before colonialism. And, you know, a lot of them have been, you know, demolished and, you know, because of colonialism and slavery and things like that. So we had a history, we had lots of things to be proud of. We had kings and queens, all of these things I learned originally, as I said, from celebrating Black History Month, but also celebrating Black history all of the time. When I was part of this women's centre, this women's organisation, you know, it taught me a lot. I used to do Black book fairs. I used to do cultural fairs. I want to give some credit as well to, in this country, in this context, to the arts in terms of music, theatre, and also, you know, and journalism as well, you know, Black newspapers and magazines, because if it wasn't for all of those, again, I wouldn't know some of my history. I wouldn't have had the benefit of sharing that with my children. I have a grandchild now, and I actively go out of my way to educate them. So I feel like as a university, obviously, you know, that it's part of the education chain, but yeah, the university and Coventry University in particular, in the context of the population, has a role and a duty to not only celebrate it every month, but as Margaret said, every day. It's something that should be part of the curriculum, you know, part of the learning, part of the leadership. Yeah, everything.
Yeah.
I think, can I come, actually, I think, I couldn't agree more with what Annette has just said. I think that was incredibly powerful. And I just wanted to say that the point she made about the arts really brought home to me, actually, how massive our legacy has been, and yet how overlooked it has been. And that has been, that sort of rewriting came almost out of 400 years of an evaluation that said people of colour were worth less. And this meant that for hundreds of years, the innovations, writings, and successes of Black and brown have either been reclaimed by others or deliberately. And it's not just the fact that our universities, like the fantastic university in Timbuktu, which goes back hundreds and hundreds of years, is no longer seen as the cultural icon. But it's the fact that even more recently, the legacy that we have brought in to the canon in terms of inventions, arts, music, scientific research of Black and multi-ethnic people have been overlooked, or they've been claimed by others. So you've got Joseph Bollon, the Chevalier de Saint-Georges, who was the court composer, taught Marie Antoinette to play the violin, predated Mozart. His music's almost overlooked totally, but he's also called the Black Mozart, when really Mozart should be called the White Chevalier. We wouldn't know that. Universities should really be telling us more about that sort of context. And the person who created the light bulb filament that didn't burst into flames was an African American. So it wasn't Watt, it wasn't Edison, whose names we know. It was some poor overlooked sap called Lewis Latimer. It's only because of Black History Month and telling of our history through the Black History Month celebrations that I've learned these sorts of facts. And I think it's really important for us to celebrate not just in 1 month of the year, because it's so limited. It's just not enough time for us to absorb that. Sorry to crushed him on the end.
No, that's it. Let's get in there.
That was really good. So Margaret, so does Black History Month hold more significance in 2020 in the light of the Black Lives Matter movement?
Yes, in a strange way, I think it does, because the Black Lives Matter movement sort of shone a light on the fact that 1 month is a pitifully useless way of looking at the lives and value of Black people. We understand its temporal limitation is farcically little, as we just discussed. I think that it certainly shone a light on the fact that there's a great wealth of writing, there's a great canon of knowledge that white people are not necessarily privy to. And I think the Black Lives Matter movement has made it really clear that there needs to be a better engagement with all of that. And that's a great, so it's made us look very, very differently at the weight we put on. And whereas it used to be a celebration, I think, for us to look at ourselves, I think now it's almost much more didactic than that. And it's actually an opportunity for others to say, oh my goodness, I haven't looked at this at all. What should I be seeing? How?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Over to you, Annette. What do you think about the Black Lives Matter movement being significant in our celebrations when it comes to Black History Month?
Yeah, I agree with everything that Margaret just said. For me personally, it hasn't made it more significant. I have to say that, because it's just something that, like I said, I recognise that I've been passionate about for a very long time. But I do accept that for some people, yes, it's definitely made it more significant. I think it's made it more acceptable for people, for non-Black people, or people who aren't Black, to not just celebrate it, but also to try and to learn more about Black history. I think it's made it more acceptable to talk about the role of white history in Black history, because I think this is the thing. When we talk about Black history, people think, okay, that's for Black people. Okay, no, because our history is entangled with white history and the Western world history and British history. We're in Britain and we're in the UK, and so you can't separate the two, and we shouldn't. But we have done, but we shouldn't. So I see it as an opportunity, as Margaret said. The Black Lives Matter movement has given us an opportunity to, I think, like I said, shed more light on our history, to get some more impetus on the call for it to be something that should be done 365 days a year, because I think there are lots of people in academia and outside of academia, activists, that have been actually trying to do this for a very long time. And just to say about Black Lives Matter, that's a movement that is new, but Black Lives Matter has been, Black people have been chanting this since the first African slave resisted going onto the first slave ship. They might not have used those words, but we've been saying saying Black Lives Matter forever. We've been saying decolonize the curriculum forever. We use the different words. Again, if I go back to, I can only go back as, you know, personal knowledge, but, you know, my dad, you know, we used to have in when they came from the Caribbean, they used to have what they called supplementary schools and Saturday schools. I knew it as Saturday school, and it was at Sydney Stringer in Coventry, going back in the 70s and 80s. And some of it was about learning, you know, English and maths, or giving you support for English and maths. But it was also an opportunity to find out some of your own culture and some of our own history. We have, and again, I want to give some credit to the arts, and I'm going to say in particular for me and my generation is like reggae music. And I have to say Rastafari. I have never been a Rasta, yeah, but I have learnt a lot, I'm going to tell you, from the Rasta movement as a British Black person, and from reggae music. I mean, things have moved on now. We've got other music now, so we've got grime, hip hop, you know, there's all sorts of other music that is educational and is sharing. But the arts for me, definitely, and theatre. The first time I went to, I have to say, you know, the first time I went to actually to see a Black show, and actually most of the shows I go to see, are Black shows, but not completely. But I've learnt a lot in terms of my history, in terms of the history of Britain, in how I'm here and how I've got here. So sorry, just to go back to your, you know, to your question, it is more significant for some, but I just feel like it's an opportunity to actually ride on this wave of understanding, empathy, and people, you know, trying to, you know, learn more about what it means to be Black, you know, what it means to be, you know, what racism, you know, how that plays out in a lot of Black people's lives, and that we can use that to learn from.
Thank you very much.